Hey everyone, and welcome back to the GetwellBe podcast. This podcast is designed to arm you with the knowledge and awareness you need to get and stay well your whole life. Before we get started, remember you can read the written version of this episode with tons of research links over at getwellbe.com, where you'll also find information about the WellBe non-toxic product database and our other programs, including Spark Health, a program designed for people trying to detoxify their home and habits. So think of it like Marie Kondo, a sort of clean it up and clean it out step-by-step process. Okay, now let's jump in on the very complicated topic of sunscreen. In the 1960s and 70s, it was all the rage to have a deep bronze glow. You can remember those silver foils people used on the beach and tanning oil and all that stuff. Then, of course, skin cancer exploded and became a major issue as a result, and there was a big swing in the other direction. Since about the 1980s, we were taught to always wear sunscreen. And sure, sunscreen helps shield us against skin cancer and other harmful effects of the sun. But in the past few years, it's become clear that the answer is neither be a sun worshiper, nor is it to slather on sunscreen all the time and hide from the sun. The truth is, like most things, it's a balance. So exposing our skin to the sun for at least some part of each day is important for many reasons, and it turns out also that not all sunscreens are created equal. In fact, some common chemicals we're using in lots of sunscreens for decades now have been found to be seriously harmful to our health and to the health of marine life, including coral, which is hugely important for climate change and cleaning up our oceans. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about sunscreen ingredients to avoid, the best non-toxic sunscreen choices, the risks of too much sunscreen, natural sunscreen alternatives, and much more. So first, if we're going to talk about why we should wear sunscreen, we should also talk about vitamin D. So the need for vitamin D, which we get mostly from the sun hitting our skin, is irrefutable. Now we're seeing a major shift in the recommendations from never let your skin see the sun to protect yourself from sun damage, which is different. Sun damage is too much sun exposure or exposure to the sun when it's too strong. According to the National Cancer Institute, the rate of new melanoma, which is skin cancer cases, in the U.S. has tripled since the 1970s. Currently, an estimated 1 in 5 Americans will develop skin cancer in their lifetime, and in the U.S., more than 7,000 people die from melanoma annually. One of the main risk factors for this is too much sun exposure. Studies have shown that UV radiation from the sun makes it more likely that a person will develop melanoma and other skin cancers. The FDA has also done some work to ensure that the sunscreens on the market are actually protecting people from skin cancer. In 2019, they laid out new regulations to better protect consumers, and in 2020, those regulations were signed into law. They include the requirements that all sunscreen products list their active ingredients on the front, and that all products with an SPF of 15 or above provide broad-spectrum protection against UVA and UVB rays, among others. However, some of the ingredients used in the majority of sunscreens are harmful, so let's get into why. It's important to understand that all sunscreens fall into one of two categories, chemical or mineral. Mineral sunscreen formulas sit atop your skin to create a physical barrier against the sun, while chemical sunscreen formulas, which account for most sunscreens on the market, use chemical UV filters to protect your skin from the sun's rays. When we talk about sunscreen ingredients to avoid, we're almost exclusively referring to those found in chemical sunscreens. That's because the chemical UV filters they use are rapidly absorbed by the skin, your body's largest organ. Several of these chemical UV filters appear to be endocrine disrupting or hormone disrupting. They interfere with your hormones, which then can create all sorts of chronic health issues and diseases. According to the World Health Organization, endocrine or hormone disruptors are suspected of being associated with altered reproductive function in male and females, increased incidence of breast cancer, abnormal growth patterns, neurodevelopmental delays in children, changes in immune function, i.e. compromising your immune system and your ability to fight off infections, and much more. This is all pretty concerning. It's especially troublesome in the case of sunscreen for children and babies who are much more vulnerable to toxic chemicals. What's more, many baby sunscreens advertised as organic and natural actually contain some of these harmful chemicals. What's more, as we reported in a WellBe wrap-up not too long ago, chemicals from sunscreens accumulate in the body at high levels, reaching concentrations that are far greater than the FDA's safety threshold. Most chemical sunscreens have a long list of ingredients, so it's important to become familiar with the most harmful ones so you can spot them easily and quickly and not buy that sunscreen. Or if you already own it, throw it out. Here's a fairly comprehensive list of sunscreen ingredients to avoid. 1. Avobenzone. This ingredient is a known endocrine disruptor that can reduce coral resilience against rising ocean temperatures, meaning it's bad for your health and for the planet. It's been banned in Hawaii, but it's still common in many sunscreens. Next up, we have benzene. An online pharmacy and pharmaceutical testing company recently detected high levels of benzene in 27% of the sunscreen and after sun care products that they tested, with some containing levels up to 3 times the FDA limit. According to the CDC and the World Health Organization and many other organizations, benzene is known to cause cancer and can be absorbed through the skin. Side note, the same company that found this testing also found high levels of benzene in several different brands of hand sanitizer that consumers were snapping up during the early days of the COVID pandemic. Next up, we have homosalate. Studies have shown that homosalate can mimic hormones and alter the endocrine or hormone system. Next up, we have actinazate. This chemical can cause moderate to severe skin allergies and has been shown to alter hormone function. Even scarier is that it's been detected in breast milk, meaning extra vulnerable infants are being exposed. And then we have octisalate. While there aren't any studies conclusively tying this ingredient to health risks, according to the Environmental Working Group, there's insufficient data to deem it safe. A study from the FDA found that those who had used sunscreen containing octisalate had blood levels of the ingredients that were 10 times the cutoff for exposure. Next up, we have octocrylene. Though octocrylene itself isn't known to harm human health, researchers recently found that as it ages over time, either on a shelf in the store or in your home, it degrades to form the dangerous compound benzophenone. Benzophenone is a known endocrine disruptor and carcinogen, and octocrylene itself, while not harmful to humans, or they haven't found it to be so far, is a potential allergen and isn't biodegradable. The researchers found octocrylene in various popular brands like L'Oreal, Coppertone, Neutrogena, and many more, including some sunscreens meant for children. Then we have para-aminobenzoic acid, also known as PABA, P-A-B-A. This ingredient has been linked to allergic dermatitis and can be toxic at high doses. Last but not least, we have oxybenzone. This is a very common ingredient in sunscreen and has been linked to allergic skin reactions. It's also been linked to endometriosis in women and disruption of reproductive hormones. The CDC has detected it in more than 96% of Americans. Yikes. The risks of certain sunscreen ingredients don't stop with human health. Chemicals commonly used in sunscreens have been shown to not only disrupt human hormones, but also harm the environment. According to the Environmental Working Group, oxybenzone damages the DNA of coral larvae, leading to damage and deformation of the coral. It can also contribute to coral bleaching and coral death. The destruction caused is so severe that in May 2018, Hawaii passed a bill prohibiting the sale of sunscreens containing oxybenzone and actinazate, which are used in at least 70% of all sunscreens today. Then, several islands in Hawaii went even further and passed a bill in 2022 banning the sale of sunscreens containing avobenzone and octocrylene. In July 2019, the U.S. Virgin Islands passed a similar bill banning all but coral-safe sunscreens, which went into effect in March 2020. Then Key West, Florida, considered a similar ban, but the governor of Florida signed a controversial bill in 2020 preventing local governments from imposing such bans. California is still considering enacting a ban that would prohibit all but coral-safe sunscreen. And then other locations outside the U.S. that have enacted bans include parts of Mexico, Aruba, Bonaire, and Palau. One other important thing to note is, regardless of ingredient, you should avoid buying spray sunscreen. Why is that? We'll be right back with the reason, as well as what sunscreens you should buy after this quick message. I don't know about you, but I never listen to the end of a podcast, so I'm hopping in here to let you know that the best way to stay empowered and on top of your health is to be in the WellBe community. So head to getwellbe.com/subscribe to make sure you're in like Flynn. On getwellbe.com, you'll learn about our online programs to help you go deeper and make life-altering changes to your health, and our awesome non-toxic product database. If you're more of a social media person, let's be friends on Instagram. Find me at getwellbe. Okay, now back to why spray sunscreens are bad and what sunscreens you should be using. Now, according to the Environmental Working Group, when you apply spray sunscreen, you inhale any toxic chemicals that are in the spray. Your lungs are a faster highway to your bloodstream than your skin, so this can be more detrimental to your health than chemicals in sunscreen lotion. If you absolutely can't give up spray sunscreen, try to spray it directly against the palm of your hand, away from your face, and then rub it onto your body. This should at least minimize how many chemical particles are released into the air for you to inhale. And make sure if you ever spray sunscreen around a child that you are far, far away from them and only do it into the palm of your hand because their lungs are even more vulnerable. Considering all the scary information I just mentioned, you'll probably want to seek out a non-toxic sunscreen. The best non-toxic sunscreen choices are almost all mineral sunscreens, which the FDA generally recognizes to be safe and effective. Almost all the sunscreens that received high scores for safety from the Environmental Working Group were also mineral formulas. Mineral sunscreens are safer because they don't penetrate the skin, and therefore they can't mess with your hormones. Of course, not penetrating your skin means they can't fully rub the sunscreen in, which can create a bit of a white cast on your skin. But newer products are getting much, much better and are already better at helping you avoid the ghost look. According to the Environmental Working Group's executive summary, there's been a dramatic increase in mineral-only sunscreens since 2007, more than doubling from 17% of products then to 41% of products today. And it will keep going higher, we think. So it makes sense that it's becoming easier to find a mineral-based, non-toxic sunscreen that rubs in completely. In terms of active ingredients, the best non-toxic sunscreen ingredients you should keep an eye out for are 1, zinc oxide, and 2, titanium dioxide. Titanium dioxide is classified by the International Agency for Research on Cancer as a possible carcinogen to humans, but more research is needed, and since your skin doesn't absorb the sunscreen, this risk is likely minimal compared to if you were to absorb it. For a full list of WellBe-approved non-toxic sunscreens, plus 2,000 more researched and vetted items from clean food brands to sleep aids to non-toxic beauty products and much, much more, check out the WellBe non-toxic product database, and you can find that on getwellbe.com. So for the sake of the environment and your internal health, should you skip sunscreen altogether? Not exactly. But the EWG, or the Environmental Working Group, does recommend that you think of it as a last resort. Rather than reaching for the sunscreen as soon as you head out the door, opt first for what's called natural sunscreen alternatives. So what's that? It's fairly simple. Think about what other options you have to limit your sun exposure besides putting on sunscreen. Can you wear long sleeves and or pants? Can you pack a hat? Can you carry an umbrella? Can you just find some shade? All of these can be major mitigating factors that protect you from sun damage without putting unsafe ingredients into your body. You can also be wise about when you get your sun exposure. For instance, studies have shown that the sun is strongest and your body is best at synthesizing vitamin D around noon. This means that you can either go out in the sun around that time, but only for a short while, which means you'll have less risk of skin damage because you won't be out for very long, while still getting the sun exposure necessary for your body to absorb vitamin D. Or you can go in the sun early or late in the day when the sun is less strong, and therefore you have less chance of getting sun damage, but then you would need to be in the sun for longer to really get that proper vitamin D absorption. Remember, you can use common sense about how much sun is too much or being in the sun when it feels strong. If your skin feels hot, chances are you've already been in the sun for too long and you're likely getting a sunburn. If you're going to be in the direct and strong sun for more than 30 minutes and it's too hot or impractical to wear long sleeves and a hat, it's a good idea to use sunscreen. In those cases, make sure you reach for a mineral formula that doesn't contain any of the scary chemicals I mentioned. While the risk of skin cancer is real and you can thoughtfully choose mineral-based, non-toxic sunscreen, there's also a counter-argument that too much sunscreen is bad because we need more sun exposure for our health to get that critical vitamin D that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. An increasing body of research supports the notion that we need a certain amount of sunlight and that guidelines encouraging people to stay out of the sun as much as possible are actually dangerous. One striking study of 30,000 women over the course of 20 years showed that those who avoided the sun had a whole host of health issues, including autoimmune disease and life-threatening cancers. Other research has shown that sun exposure can lower blood pressure and protect against cardiovascular disease. All of this means that too much sunscreen could actually be harming your health rather than protecting it. Now, one of the main reasons that vitamin D is so essential is that when your sun is exposed to sunlight, it turns cholesterol into vitamin D that your body can use effectively. While supplements can help improve vitamin D levels, evidence suggests that supplements can't replace sun exposure. Another very important reason is that the sun sets or regulates your circadian rhythm, which tells your hormones when to increase and when to decrease throughout the day and night. Vitamin D plays an important role in many other aspects of your health, and nearly 40% of Americans, might even be higher, are vitamin D deficient, perhaps in part because of too much sunscreen use. This matters a lot because vitamin D deficiency has been linked to many health issues, including osteoporosis, cancer, and even depression. The importance of vitamin D came to light once again during the COVID-19 pandemic, as low levels of vitamin D were associated with more severe and more fatal cases of the virus. We have a whole WellBe guide on vitamin D, so you can check that out on getwellbe.com by searching for it in our search bar. Just search vitamin D, or you can search getwellbe and vitamin D in your podcast app search function, because I recorded an episode about it 2 years ago. All right, so I hope that gives you some clarity about when to use sunscreen versus just wearing sun protective things, and also when and how often and how much you need to expose your skin without sunscreen or long sleeves to the sun for that sweet, sweet vitamin D. And hopefully this episode also helped you understand which kinds of sunscreen and ingredients are to be avoided. As I mentioned earlier, the WellBe non-toxic product database has a ton of great brands with easy links for ordering and ratings from third-party organizations telling you how non-toxic they are and what ingredients they contain. Now, go enjoy summer. Just like the ocean, my perspective on the sun is don't fear it, don't vilify it, but deeply respect it and understand its power. We need it, but it can also be destructive, and it can harm us if we don't know how best to interact with it. To read the written version of this episode with plenty of research links and links to the non-toxic product database for easy ordering, head to getwellbe.com or check out the link to this article in the show notes. And while you're there, definitely become a WellBe Insider to get all of our latest content in your inbox directly. If you haven't already and found this episode helpful or interesting, subscribe to the podcast. This way you'll never miss a new episode and they'll be delivered to you whenever we publish a new one. And please share this episode with family or friends who you think might find it valuable and informative. It means a lot and helps more people find the podcast. And if you love the Get WellBe podcast, please leave a quick review. It does help so much for showing up in search results. If you already have, then thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is your host, Adrienne Nolan-Smith, and thanks again for listening to the Get WellBe podcast.